everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is all about one of the first big family trips that we took with our son. This was before our daughter was born, so we only had one kid at the time, but certainly an eye-opening experience. We had a great time as a family. We learned a lot, and it was a really exciting adventure. So I'm going to dive into it in a little more detail today. You'll see that I've talked about this in other videos. I'll link one of them above so you can watch all and get some tidbits about travel with kids. But this video is really about getting into the story of our first major trip in more detail. So I like to call this trip our family backpacking trip. We did 5 cities around Spain and Gibraltar with our son. He was about, I think he just turned 2 at the time, so about 25 months old. And we did this over a little more than 2 weeks. So it was quite an adventure. We moved quickly, but we also took some time to enjoy the sights and the sounds of each of the cities. So let's start out with the journey. We flew from our home airport of Newark over to Madrid. We had a direct flight, which was nice for my son's first transatlantic travel experience. And we had 3 seats in the back of the plane. So because he was over 2, he needed his own seat. And we had a configuration where we had 2 seats next to each other and then 1 seat behind. This gave us quite a bit of space. Nobody filled up the empty seat next to the single seat, and so we kind of had our own family nook, which was really nice. Starting out with the flight, it was a little rough at the beginning. My son was not thrilled about having to buckle his seatbelt. He had a bit of a meltdown during taxi and takeoff. Fortunately, we had a tablet with us, which was great, so we were able to distract him. We had pre-downloaded movies, which I strongly recommend for any travel. And so he was able to watch even though there was no Wi-Fi on board. So we take off, we get in the air. It's an overnight flight. He falls asleep. The rest of the flight goes very smoothly. Land in Madrid, passport control, grab our baggage. And then maybe we were a little too ambitious about this, but we decided we were going to take the subway, or the metro as it's called, all the way to our Airbnb. Now, if you know anything about Madrid, the metro is not accessible at every station. And so we had some challenges. We carried stroller and suitcases up and down some flights of stairs. We navigated some tricky turnstiles, escalators. In hindsight, certainly now, with us having a little more money and a little more experience, we probably would have taken a taxi or an Uber. But at the time, we were young, we were just starting out, and so we decided to take public transit. We actually took public transit throughout this trip. In other cities, it was a little easier. We were on subways, we were on buses, we took a long-distance train, and we had a variety of different adventures. So certainly when you're deciding if you're going to take public transit with your kids, it's really all about checking out the system in advance, how accessible it is, how crowded it's likely to be, and looking at your budget and your comfort level. So Madrid was great. We had a good time. We walked around. We went to local shops and playgrounds. We went to a few cafes. My son was really good. He sat for a number of meals, which was really impressive to me. We did have one incident where he fell out of a chair. High chairs are not that common in Southern Europe, and so he often had to sit in regular chairs. One of them didn't have a back, and he fell through at one point, so that was a little unpleasant. But you just have to watch out for that. Maybe in hindsight, bring a booster seat, although it's always a question of how much you want to carry versus how much you need on site, and you're kind of doing that cost-benefit analysis. We stayed in a nice apartment. It was an Airbnb studio apartment. Had a beautiful rooftop patio, so we got some great exercise time running around the patio. We had the chance to look around and enjoy the beautiful view of the city. My son had a bit of jet lag at the beginning, which is understandable. So for those first few nights where he was up late, the patio was a really nice place to go and try to tire him out a bit so he could get on a more adjusted schedule. So after a few days in Madrid, we moved on. We took the high speed train to Barcelona. Because he was under 4, he could ride on our laps, so we only had to buy 2 tickets, and we sat in second class. It was very comfortable. Again, the tablet saved us. Nice few-hour ride. He enjoyed looking out the window. He really liked scenery. He liked looking at the villages and the countryside along the way. Had some lunch in the cafe car, which he thought was really cool. And then in Barcelona, having learned our lesson, we called an Uber. It wasn't Uber, it was the local version of Uber, but basically the same idea. They came, they actually had this foam car seat for him that they were able to set up, which was great because I don't like traveling with car seats. They're heavy, they're bulky, they're inconvenient. So it's always great to source out seating on arrival and at different places where you travel. We went to the Airbnb. It wasn't in the nicest part of town. I didn't realize that at first when I booked. So we got dropped off and we were a little uncomfortable, but I was able to get in touch with the host. I had to call her. Fortunately, I speak Spanish. She came downstairs. She let us into the building. Stairs, no elevator. So it was a bit challenging, but we got up and she actually had the perfect kid friendly room for us. So basically, she had had kids before and they had moved out, but she kept their childhood bedroom for Airbnb guests. And so she still had all the toys. She had bunk beds. It was great. She was lovely. We touched base with her. She had been to Canada. We bonded over that. I translated conversation back and forth, and we really enjoyed staying with her. Barcelona is a fun city, as you know, a lot for families to do. We walked on the Rambla. It was late September, so it wasn't that busy. Had lunch outside, which my son really enjoyed. Checked out the waterfront. We went on a little harbor cruise, which he thought was really cool. We chased some pigeons, another great kid activity. Kids love birds, especially my kids. So that was a lot of fun too. Just walking up, enjoying the Rambla, enjoying Well Park as well. And basically, we got around using public transit. It was a lot more accessible in Barcelona than it was in Madrid. We would hail rideshare once in a while. And we tried to make it as fun and accessible for him as possible. So we definitely had to travel at a slower pace. We had to build in some kid activities. For example, going to playgrounds. Even right across the street from the Sagrada Familia, he joined a family soccer game. So that was a lot of fun. My son's a picky eater. I was proud of him for trying some new foods, but there was still a lot of McDonald's here and there and other things to make him a little more comfortable. I went to the store and bought some pasta at one point and made it just so that he could eat some of his familiar foods. So after a few days in Barcelona, we moved on. We went to the airport and we hopped on a discount flight down to Malaga. Now, Malaga is one of my favorite spots in Spain. It's on the Sunshine Coast. It has a beautiful beach in town, a charming old city. And once again, we stayed in a lovely apartment, just outside of the old city. Really nice area. And again, it was hot there, so we had to give my son some time to adjust. We had to avoid the hottest part of the day, but he very much enjoyed wandering around, going to the beach, chasing birds, going to the playground, all the stuff that kids enjoy. And we met some locals. We had some adventures. It was a great time. So after relaxing and exploring Malaga for a bit, we caught an inner city bus down to a town called Almeria. And when I plan family trips, I really like to do a combination of city exploration and beach. I'm not a big beach person, but my wife likes the beach. My kids like the beach. And so we try to balance it and give us something for everyone. So this was a beautiful very local beachside town. We rented a condo a block from the beach, not touristy at all. There were supermarkets, there was even office space on the beach. It really was not overdeveloped. And we had a combination of city exploration and beach days. Again, playground. I love markets, so I would slip out in the morning to the local market, buy some produce, buy some food for the day. My son loves the supermarket. I took him to the supermarket a few times so he could look around and see what they had to offer there. And we really enjoyed, I think it was 4 or 5 relaxing days on the beach. Um, we also had an adventure while we were on the Sunshine Coast. So we did a day trip down to Gibraltar. And this was really just done on a whim. It was while we were in Malaga. We had kind of seen Malaga. It's not a huge city, and we were looking for something else to do. So we booked this day trip down to Gibraltar. It was a little intense. We had to take a 3-hour bus ride down to the nearest Spanish town and then walk across the border into Gibraltar. If you've ever been to Gibraltar, it's a tiny territory. Really cool. You actually walk across or you take a bus across the runway of their airport. So once you've crossed the border, there's a traffic light. And when the light goes green, the planes stop taking off and landing, and everybody crosses the runway. That was a really neat experience. But the main draw of Gibraltar is monkeys. And so they have the only wild monkey troop living in Europe. They're macaque monkeys. They live on the Rock in Gibraltar, which is a huge mountain that exists in the territory. And so, of course, we hiked up a little bit and then we took the cable car up to see the monkeys. And this was one of the most spectacular parts of the trip. My son loves animals, and this was a real animal encounter experience. So these monkeys are not behind fences, they come right up to you. It's intimidating at times, actually, but really exciting as long as you follow the rules. Don't bring any food or anything that would attract them. We just hiked all around this rock and saw different monkeys living in their natural habitat, mothers, fathers, and children roaming around in different little troops. Very exciting. We didn't do any of the organized tours or rent a taxi. It was quite hot, so we alternated between going inside the air conditioned restaurants and gift shops and going out to explore. And we had a beautiful lunch on the rock in Gibraltar, overlooking the sea. My son sat in the window and watched the monkeys. He was very satisfied while we ate our beautiful, delicious lunch. And then after making our way down from the rock, we explored the town of Gibraltar. We walked around, did some souvenir shopping, checked out what is a very authentically British territory right next to Spain. So it's kind of wild that you walk across that border and the culture is completely different. So it was an interesting experience for us. I think my son was just enjoying looking around at the monkeys and meeting some people along the way who were very friendly and took, of course, an interest in seeing a child visiting Gibraltar. There were also a lot of really cool drains there. And one thing my son loved when he was 2 was drains. He had an obsession with drains. There are pictures of him on this trip exploring different drains in different cities. And so he really took it all in and enjoyed it. And then we finished out our trip back in Madrid. So we flew back from Almeria up to Madrid, spent a night there, really just decompressing, preparing to go home. We did a little sightseeing. We went to a children's museum, ate outside, went to a few more playgrounds, and then flew home. Now, on the flight home, we had to fly through Brussels. It was not a direct trip. There were some delays, and so it made for a really long journey. And probably the hardest part of this trip with my son was waiting in the customs hall to clear customs and immigration after returning home. He was losing his mind, running around in circles, being really restless, and there was really nothing we could do. We couldn't fault him for it. We knew we had pushed him quite a bit on this trip, and it was a lot for a 2-year old. And so we just, I'm sure, as you can imagine, we got frustrated, but we tried to stay as calm as we could and just accept, as you do when you're traveling with kids, that sometimes they can't keep up with your pace and you just have to let them be. Finished out the trip. Going home from the airport, we had parked at the airport. I really like doing offsite parking at the airport with kids. It takes away the whole complexity of trying to get a taxi or an Uber and then car seat issues and all of that. You just have your own car. I usually go to the offsite parking lot, pick up the car, come back to the terminal, pick up my wife and kids at loading and unloading, and then we take off to head home. So just before ending the video, I want to share a couple of my thoughts or takeaways from this experience. The first one is that you, as I've said before, have to travel at a slower pace. You have to build in kid-friendly activities, and you have to make sure that you give them adequate rest. You account for jet lag and all of that. Those are some of the challenging parts, but there's also the fun of traveling with kids. They have such a different perspective on things. So if I didn't have my son with me on this trip, I never would have, and I know this sounds silly, but I never would have appreciated the style of drains in different Spanish cities. And I'm an architecture person, so I actually thought that was really cool. And I appreciated that he pointed it out to me. He loved watching the boardwalk in Barcelona separate to let the boats through. Again, something you would probably not pay attention to if you weren't there with a kid, but it was really fascinating to see it through his eyes. And we met a lot more locals because he would be in playgrounds and then we would start chatting with the parents of other kids. And so he was really a great icebreaker in that way, too. I think one of the main lessons that we learned from this trip is that you can't do a city hop trip at the same pace with a kid as you would without. So now we tend to plan our trips with, 2 or 3 destinations at most. 5 was really ambitious. It was our first major trip with a kid. And now with 2 kids, we certainly wouldn't be able to do it. But even then, I think we pushed him a little too hard at times, and he was quite exhausted after. So that was one of the major lessons learned. So I encourage you to comment below. Let me know what your experiences have been like traveling with kids. What have you learned? What have you enjoyed? What has been more challenging? And then please do subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell so that you're notified of future videos. And of course, give me the thumbs up if you like this video. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care. Bye.